And Robert M. Lee, Senior Instructor at SANS and CEO at Dragos. He will be moderating today's webcast. If during the webcast you have any questions for our presenters, please enter them into the questions window located on the GoToWebinar interface at any time. Please note that this webcast is being recorded, and a copy of the slides and recording of this webcast will be available for viewing later today and can be found on the SANS registration page. And with that, I'd like to hand the webcast over to Tim.
Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, and good evening for people in other parts of the world. These webcasts have grown as we are all located in our homes in this time, and this is a great opportunity for some continuing education, some learning, some exposure to new products while many of you are working from home. And for those of you who are with Critical Infrastructure Key Resource and you are at work, we applaud and appreciate all of your efforts, and thank you. As we move forward with a series of webcasts and learning opportunities between SANS and Dragos, we have a number of different things that are occurring. In a couple of weeks, I will draw attention to a full-day virtual conference that SANS and Dragos are working on together for the community that you can go and find under webcasts and register for that if you have not already. But this one in particular, so just like at our summits that Rob and I co-chair for the ICS community, we often will have asset owners speak, we'll have joint vendors and asset owners talk, and we'll have some vendor-sponsored specific events for people to go and see products that they are interested in, that they're pursuing, or could definitely bring back to the office and help with some of the challenges that we're facing. This webcast is definitely more on the vendor-sponsored commercial components, and it is going to be focusing on a new offering that is available from Dragos, and will be something that a number of people across different parts of the community and different sectors could immediately gain value from. So we'll be talking about why this capability and technology is needed. Definitely there'll be a lot of focus on educational content and where this helps and challenges that people are having. And for any of you that are familiar with Rob, you know that one of the most painful things for him to do is actually sell or promote a product. So while this is a vendor-sponsored webcast, it's not going to be completely focused on sales, because I don't think that's something in Rob's DNA that he's capable of doing. Having said all that, I get to be the stage setter, so the opening act for Mr. Rob M. Lee. Rob, if you could go to the next slide. I will take as little time as possible, 10, 15, maybe 5-10 minutes. I've seen Rob's content, and I really would like to be able to spend more time in those areas. The couple of things I'm going to talk about as I've reviewed Rob's slide and talked about this webinar with him is really my view of industrial control system technology adoption trends and some growing gaps of concern, especially now in today's environment. I'll move to more of a way that I've been thinking about detection maturity, and definitely mirrored with entity capabilities and just managing that risk of where do you make investments, where do you get dedicated resource, and talk a little bit along those lines around workforce. And then I will turn it over to Rob to discuss the Neighborhood Watch offering and the components of that. If you can go to the next slide. So going to be a couple of build slides here just so that we can see these different trends. A piece just that I think is inherently known by many who are working in this space, the adoption and moving from electromechanicals and direct control up into more cyber digital enabled assets, and the growing trend of that happening throughout these time periods from the mid 80s to the 90s, with very little cyber digital elements in a lot of our industry and in a lot of our environments, and moving up into current time in the 2000s, and continuing to trend that way for the foreseeable future. Any of the discussions along the lines of dumbing down a smart grid or rolling back certain technologies and moving to analog, those get a lot of media attention. But even in the industries where they're being looked at at the holiest of holies at certain critical sites, and only at those sites. no industry is kind of widely looking at rolling back to more analog manual controls across the board and what that would mean for their resources, for their footprint, for their workforce. They're looking where it's being looked at. It's only being looked at very, very critical sites. So this trend is going to continue higher and higher as we progress forward. If you can go to the next slide, we'll add in kind of a look at protocols. So again, along the same trend line where you had kind of serial analog modems and different capabilities for systems to communicate with proprietary protocols, and definitely a big boost, kind of a jump in the trend line into even proprietary protocols being encapsulated and kind of wrapped in traditional routable protocols, and the movement to just traditional routable protocols across the board for most technologies where they support it. And now kind of trending along with the adoption of digital assets, you get the growth in kind of more traditional protocols that need to be understood. Moving towards the remote access side, and this is an area that I think we need to really understand. Even before we had kind of the traditional routable protocols, you had sort of analog direct modem access remotely. And over time, it sort of trended with it. There was a little bit of a dip and a spread where you started to see some sectors like the electric sector trying to understand, due to compliance and regulations, what it meant for remote access and whether you would need to physically go to a site or if you could do it through remote means. That is kind of backtracking with the technology adoptions, that it's absolutely necessary and required. The piece that I'm looking to call out here is this movement from remote access everywhere for everybody that is now kind of happening with the current pandemic environment that we're in, and moving at a rate that is faster than what should have been kind of planned, sequenced out, done in a very specific way based on people with essential needs, and based on it is happening extremely quick in a way that is providing the access to the people who need it. So absolutely necessary for our critical infrastructure key resource personnel to keep them safe and to continue to operate and provide those services. But it is probably happening at a rate that is faster than it should be happening from a security perspective. So from a safety and reliability, it is absolutely happening at the rate that it needs to. But from a security perspective, this is something we're going to have to play catch up with later. And in the meantime, it opens the door for unintended actors to gain access, gain view, begin to have kind of access to systems that they've never previously had before, potentially. And I also think it moves us down a path of how do we ever roll it back? Once it's been kind of introduced, and once we start looking at adopting newer technologies in ways that we hadn't before, and we understand the benefits of those in our business where we may have had some reluctance before, now it's more of an essential need, and then it's going to be difficult to roll back later. If you can go to the last piece here, it's kind of the adoption of the detection capability. So again, early days, pre-protocol implementation, kind of this detection capability has been slow to uptick within industrial control system space. In some cases due to the technology, in some cases due to the vendors not kind of approving or allowing certain technology implementations in a way that wouldn't impact warranties. And then ultimately now to the world we're in, where generally speaking, the vendors have provided and developed this capability, and it's now up to the asset owners to buy and procure and support and really try to balance and manage what type of solution works best for them. So you've seen a number of solutions come into market. You've seen a number of bake-offs across different conferences or within organizations to do product selection. The piece that I want to highlight, and then Rob, if you can advance, is this growing detection gap of, as we're increasing digital assets, as we're increasing traditional protocols, as we're increasing remote access, and we're not following the same trend with increasing our detection capabilities in-house or through managed services. We're getting to a point where that detection gap is growing, and we need to start turning it up, because I don't think the remote access or any of these other trend lines are going to turn down after this pandemic environment is over. So truly, At this point in time, we need to start looking at increasing and moving upwards the trend for the detection, specific in ICS environments. This is a slide that Rob and I talked about quite a bit. It's the way that I've been thinking about this in our courses and talking to students, because we will often get the question of, well, hey, just tell us what to do. When we go back to our plant, to our refinery, to our gen station, to our substation, to our control centers, we don't want to go and evaluate 20 different products and try to figure out which ones work. Who has created a study? Who has created some report? Can I go to Gartner? Can I go to, where do I go to find out, is network whitelisting the best? Is threat behavior analytics the best? Is anomaly detection the best? What's the best solution for industrial control systems? And is there a hybrid that's better? And truly, this slide is not meant to focus on those technologies. I'm not indicating that anomaly detection is better than threat or better than network whitelisting. I'm indicating that the technology is part of it, but the true impact is going to be based on this bottom axis of what are your capabilities of the environment you're trying to do collection on. Is it you can only do hosts, you can only do network taps, you can do limited span ports on your switches, kind of working across that. What are your collection capabilities? And then what are your resources on the other axis? So do you have staffing that is dedicated, that is going to be doing something with the data that you collect? Do you have budgets for tools, technology, for training on those tools and technology that you purchased? Additional O&M to add more and more people. As you start to use any one of these tools, you're going to get more information and you're going to get a better understanding of what you need to do that's going to cause work for a number of people, not just the folks that are looking at the data set. So if you have limited to no visibility, source collection capabilities, and you're just going to use existing resources, so it's going to be an add-on to somebody's existing job. So it's going to be event-driven, meaning something has happened at a site that you need to go look at and understand. Network whitelisting may be a good place for you to start. If you move into, we have all kinds of data. We've spent the last 10 years being able to get visibility, and now we have a lot of data, and we have some resources. The threat behavior analytics may be the best thing for you to look to because you are looking for known bad in those environments. If you are moving towards hey, we're going to take IT and OT and we're going to take physical security and we're going to have a massive integrated SOC and we've got an unbelievable amount of data set that's coming in and we're going to try to understand it in a way that we can operationalize for the facilities and for the plant managers and for the people there, you have full integrated visibility goals and you have a very large dedicated team and budget that this may be a solution that can work in your space. If you are somebody who has no resources and very limited visibility, moving to anomaly detection could be frustrating for you and whatever vendor you select because it's not the right fit. It's not the right marriage. And a huge underlying component of this, and this will be my last point before I turn this over, is that the workforce needs is even if you have the budgets. We had hit a point at my organization, my utility, where we had budgets for full-time positions and they were approved, but we couldn't find people to staff and put in those positions. And we found ourselves in a model where we were continuously hiring, training, developing, and then those folks would move on for a number of reasons. The retention reason is one component that companies have to struggle with, but the other is somebody who is fully capable and has been doing this in a previous role, maybe for an Intel organization or for DoD somewhere, and now you put them at a facility with limited data and limited things to actually do, they become bored in that job role and it's difficult to retain. So the availability of these folks and the kind of keeping them in a job role and happy in that job role and challenged is definitely a difficult thing to do, and where services like a managed service organization could absolutely help. So with that, I'll still be here and available, and Rob can open us up for questions at the end here, but I'd like to turn this over to Rob to kind of walk through where the new product offering helps with some of these current challenges.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. And I want to make a comment on this slide as well. Like, I obviously, when I'm teaching my ICS 515 class, I get these same kind of questions, and I think everyone's always looking for a what is the best. And the real answer to your point also is it's a mixed strategy, because your entire organization won't fit into one bucket. You might have some oil wells or a small manufacturing site that's just not worth putting all of the investment into, that maybe a critical refinery or power generation site or something else that's really, really critical to your organization. And so you might find a segmentation or whitelisting strategy at a smaller site might be appropriate, and it might be something that you can deal with. But you might get really frustrated at a whitelisting strategy where you have people coming in and out and changing environments, and maybe it's a more critical site, and so you want to do something else. And the way that I try to position this to my students and also just the folks out in the community is all the different types of detection can work together very well. It just depends on what your use cases are. If you're interested in that, I ended up writing a white paper with Sergio titled The 4 Types of Threat Detection. I've done a number of discussions on it. It's in my class. And we talk about the difference between things like threat behavior analytics and anomaly detection and config analysis and indicators. And the reality is, if you're going to do a detection strategy, I'm triaging these detections to effect, my approach would be on the threat behavior analytics style, basically the TTPs, or the tactics, techniques, and procedures of adversaries, because it's a transposable and durable detection type. Anomaly detection isn't bad. It's actually just more for creating a lower value in the detection, but more detection, so it's more broad. And that's actually a great place to go hunting, to start going and exploring things. We don't want to triage every single anomaly that comes in. So it can really, to Tim's point, encumber your team, and you can very quickly get into like an alarm fatigue mentality. So let's talk about how these things can go together. And as Tim noted, I'm going to get into our product offering and kind of what we do, and I think it's really cool. And we've already been doing it for 2 years now before we actually brought it, quote unquote, to market with a variety of companies, because we just want to really fine tune it correctly in the ICS side of the house. And so I do believe in the value, and we'll talk about it, but I want to make this as educational as possible. So I want to talk to you not just about our offering, but how to think about hunting and how to think about going and being prepared against adversaries, and how to think about really just industrial security operations in general. And then it'll lead in the last portion of really talking about our piece in it at Dragos. The first thing I want to say is take that previous discussion that Tim was doing of the overlay of our connectivity across industrial world. And the reality is we've been connected for quite some time. I go to a lot of executives and board meetings these days where the CEO will say, oh yeah, we're doing this IT OT convergence thing. And I'll tell them, that's already happened. Like, you're talking about IT OT convergence from maybe a culture perspective, but your plant's already connected. Oh no, they're disconnected. We've been told that. And then the myth of the air gap and stuff in the practitioner community, we killed that, I think, mostly years ago. That's still a predominant thought in a lot of organizations of, oh no, it's segmented off. And the reality is, no, it's been connected. The convergence we're seeing is kind of done. Like, there's windows in that environment. There's remote activity in the environment. What you're going through now, to Tim's point, is hyper connectivity. Some people will talk about digital transformation or Industry 4.0. But either way, it's hyper connectivity, and COVID, no way around it, accelerated the heck out of that. At the same time, as a direct overlay, we've seen the threat landscape change over the years, where we weren't looking for things, and so we weren't seeing them. I think back to the APT1 case, where I thought was a fantastic sort of expose on the Chinese government breaking into organizations, but publicly listed, they were industrial organizations, but the reports and the analysis never talked about industrial control systems. Why? Well, actually, a lot of that case ended up getting into industrial control environments. Those adversaries absolutely bridge that gap, if you will. But because people weren't collecting or doing detection in industrial environments, we just didn't know. It's kind of just a visibility challenge, even on where the adversary was going. And in that same way, what we found over the years is the more we look for the threats, the more we're finding. And so the old adage of, well, they're not targeting me, or we're not interesting, that's just not accurate. And I would say that this is also a maturity curve. Even though our threats are becoming far more aggressive than they ever have before, and even though they're becoming more capable, especially with the hyperconnectivity, and yeah, adversaries are absolutely taking advantage of this remote activity work that we're seeing these days. But I would also note on the maturity side that the companies around the community are doing more work. the electric, oil, manufacturing, rail, mining, et cetera, water companies we deal with, they're doing more in their industrial environments than they've ever done before. So a lot of the badness that we're seeing is actually a good thing because people are starting to get ahead of it. It's not widely adopted. We've got to do more, but we should also, really give kudos to the organizations that are taking some significant efforts. And in kind of a summarized way, like I would tell people that when you start talking about industrial threats, you are almost exclusively dealing with state actors right now. We're not seeing it get into just criminal elements and hacker for hire type groups yet, unless you're talking about like ransomware impacting ICS kind of in an untargeted way. When you're talking about the threats that are specifically going after industrial sites, those 11 different activity groups in the previous slide, we're seeing very, very, very capable adversaries. And so you have to be very thoughtful, not about just deploying a technology or deploying resources or training people, but you have to think about your strategy. What is the response strategy you want to have? Well, that's going to drive the detection strategy, which is going to drive the collection strategy. And I'm going to talk about technology and I'm going to talk about like what Dragos does, but it is absolutely impossible to do this without all three components. Everybody knows it's people, process, and technology, but so many times we overweight technology in that component. And I'm not saying you can be successful with just people and process. You do need technology because it sort of provides scalability to your efforts. It provides automation. It means that when somebody does leave the workforce, that you don't just lose all that knowledge, that we are sort of stepping up our game every year. But we have to do it all. And I try to sort of remain true to that and still teaching at SANS, even though I have a company to run. Like I love engaging with you all in the community. And my students over the years are just most motivating people in the world. But it's got to take all three. So let's talk about what that's going to look like. So from, again, trying to be more educational with this webinar, I first want to say you're obviously the most important part of this. And the fact that you showed up to a webinar to learn and listen to something new, especially during a global pandemic, let's just take a second to say thank you. Like I'm super impressed with how many people that have the opportunity, that have taken the opportunity to go better themselves and try to be better for their organizations during a really crazy time that nobody could justifiably be upset for anybody curling into a ball and just kind of saying, look, I'm going to opt out right now. And the type of people that then are on this webcast, I will tell you that there are plenty of opportunities out there to get started. So undoubtedly, you're probably familiar with the SANS classes, but I love them. The SANS ICS courses are second to none. They are skill sets that aren't vendor specific, and they provide amazing, amazing knowledge. Tim's 456 class on NERC SIP. I never thought I would like a NERC SIP class. Let me be candid and transparent to everybody. NERC SIP, no, I don't think I'll take that class. Thanks so much. I looked at that class. It's actually riveting. It's all the technical hands-on skills across all of the components of the NERC regulations. My 515 course, hey, how do you want to go hunt and think about threats and take an intelligence-driven approach to things like response? Man, that's fun. 612, if you haven't taken a look at it, hands-on, full lab, full range, absolutely getting to do things in ICS environments that you just really can't do outside the classroom environment. 410 to get you started for understanding that kind of IT/OT gap. Like they're just really good classes, but there's also free ones out there for you. The US CERT and Idaho National Labs for years have done a really good job of hosting the red versus blue class, as well as tons of free modules and information on their website. We have the Dragos 5-day course listed there. It's one that's vendor specific. It's here's kind of our methodology on this. It's not meant to replace an ICS class from SANS. It's a supplement to it. The reading list there, it's a collection of free resources. Both reading lists are. Mine is specifically resources ranging from YouTube videos to packet captures and virtual machines, just completely free stuff to get you started and hopefully be useful to you on your journey. Now, I specifically want to take a flavor of hunting in this discussion because obviously that's what we're talking about today is kind of that managed threat hunting offering. But I still want you to understand how to hunt, and I hope that whether or not you use the Dragos offering, that you go and do hunting in your environment. I hope that we can be a part of your journey and be a partner to you, but you need to be doing it with or without us. And the reality is threat hunting sounds at first like it's this elite thing that we should only really be doing if we've done all of the other basics. And that's just not accurate. Hunting done correctly is a massive amplification to all of your other efforts, especially around detection and visibility and highlighting the gaps that you have. David Bianco, a good friend of mine, years ago wrote this hunting maturity model. And he talks about the fact that hunting isn't one thing, that we can start even at hunting maturity model level 0, if you will. The initial steps in is I'm not doing a lot of routine data collection, maybe none at all. Maybe my whole hunting effort is once a quarter or once a year, I go out to the substation or the refinery or the compressor station or the plant and gather data and go through that data offline analysis. Maybe it's not routine at all, and maybe I am looking for a lot of the automatic alerting that can come out of a technology and then just really diving deep. I don't really consider hunting alert triage. Those are two different things. An alert triage effect, what most of you will do for threat detection, is analyzing an alert to its completion to determine if there's an incident, but you can still rely on a lot of alerting to try to piece together a story from a hunting perspective as well. But as you graduate up, if you will, through the hunting maturity model, you'll find that you and your organization and your requirements, especially related to the threats, will drive a maturity on more routine data collection, more automation, and coming up with entirely new processes and procedures yourself, and really getting to a place where ultimately every hunt should have the output of modifying your collection and capturing what you did into a detection. So my process of threat detection becomes stale over time, especially in the face of the adversaries, especially if all I'm ever doing is throwing indicators or anomalies. But if I really want to stay up with the latest of threats and have a durable detection strategy, I'm going to want to start creating detections off of intel like TTPs, as well as consequence analysis. What could go wrong? Maybe I could reverse the polarity of that turbine. Okay, well, how would I do it? I haven't seen a threat do it, but what's the cyber mechanism to accomplish that in an industrial environment? And can I write a robust detection around it so that next time I'll actually have a detection instead of having to hunt for it? But you really shouldn't have to hunt for the same thing twice. I really should be moving things into detection over time. And when we think about going on a hunt, really what I want people to do is get in the habit of having a purpose. Don't just go, exploring data. That can be fun, and that, if you got the time to do it, that's fine. I don't want to put anybody's strategy down, if you will, but a hunt really should have a purpose. And that way I can also measure its effectiveness and my effectiveness with it. And so when I go on a hunt, I'm going to have it be hypothesis driven. In other words, I'm going to come up with a testable question, not something I can't test because I'm going to fail right off the bat, but I'm going to come up with a hypothesis around what's going on in that environment. And then I'm going to go test it out. And I'm going to make sure that I grab the right collection to test it out. And then once I've tested it, again, try to move that into a detection. So again, years ago, David Bianco and I wrote a paper over here at SANS titled on the successful hypothesis generation for threat hunting. And what we kind of articulated there is there's 3 different categories of hypotheses. The first is domain expertise. It's you've done it before, you know what to do, kind of that art into science, like I've done this before, so I got some ideas. And maybe from a domain expertise, it's that I know, maybe I know that in my environment, Modbus TCP, function code 121 is a configuration file change for us. And I should never expect to have configuration file changes of my controllers going on outside of a maintenance or cleanup or scheduled downtime period. So I would create a hypothesis that the adversaries are doing modifications to my environment and they're doing it outside of maintenance time. Therefore, there's the temporal nature to the hunt that I want to go do. And during like peak usage, I should be looking for Modbus function code 121 type activity and the surrounding activity around it. And that helps me figure out what am I going to collect, where do I need to collect it, when do I need to collect it, and I'm creating this hypothesis, in this case, again, off domain expertise. In the same way, I might take situational awareness. Situational awareness is a broad category. It could be related to geopolitical events. Hey, COVID-19 is causing a lot of remote access operations. I'm going to have a hypothesis that adversaries are going to take advantage of that, meaning it's not going to be quote unquote anomalous activity. It's going to be abuse of legitimate credentials and access points that we're opening up ourselves. and I should go on a hunt to look for that type of activity. Well, guess what? That's going to drive, again, where do I collect? How do I turn it into a stable detection? Or maybe it's an intelligence-driven, either friendly or threat intelligence, where I might say, well, here's what my team is doing around the situation, therefore that might drive an action in the adversary, or here's TTPs that I've seen before. Here's a lateral movement to an engineering workstation with a modification of Triconics software from a Trisis or a Xenotime kind of attack like we saw in Saudi Arabia. Well, let me not just detect that, because that'd just be detection. Let me think, well, I don't have a Triconics, I have a Yokogawa system. Okay, well, what would that look like in a Yokogawa system? Let me go on a hunt to see if I can detect that same TTP but apply to my environment and hunt for the adversary. Let me go be proactive and find the adversaries before they cause effect. And I'll go back 1 second, actually got skipped over. On situational awareness, it also is that consequence-driven analysis I mentioned, where you're thinking through, you have a situational awareness and understanding of your own environments. And so you're thinking through what could bad look like, whether or not I've seen it before, and start hunting for that. Again, the purpose of hunting is to find the adversary, but the output isn't just measured against finding the adversary. The output is measured against understanding and amending your collection and visibility and creating better reliable detections. And the next question, of course, is where to hunt. So a good way to use some of these models together is another paper that I was involved in writing with some wonderful co-authors titled The Collection Management Frameworks for ICS. And this is a topic around moving past just having an asset inventory of here's my devices and here's my controllers and moving to a place of really understanding where it is and what it is and what type of data it has and how long I'm storing it and where I'm storing it. In other words, I don't just care that I have RTUs in the environment. I care that I have RTUs, they have syslog functionality, and it's stored locally at the site and for 7 days. And so that's going to help me as I go and create my hunting strategy to also understand how long back could I even see this? So if the attack was 8 days ago or the intrusion was 8 days ago, the RTU logs are going to be useless to me. But maybe I find that the longest question I can ask is 120 days from the data storage of the historian, but the way that I'm going to ask it can only rely on the historian past the 60-day mark, because the HMI Windows event logs are only 60 days, and the network monitoring appliances alerts are only back from 30 days. So if I'm going to create a hunt or a detection for using all three components, I can only do it for 30 days. If I'm going to do just two components, it'd be the Windows HMIs and the data storing across 60 days. And if it's going to be anything past 60 days, it's just going to be a historian. And so understanding your collection is really, really core. Again, not just for detection, but especially for hunting. And really what hunting is, in many ways, is the incident response without the incident. And so you're making sure that you're going to be good against the adversaries and things that you want to prepare against. And again, that's going to drive that detection and collection strategy. Another really useful framework to consider and use in this is the MITRE ATT&CK framework for ICS. So you've probably seen me, if you've paid attention to anything I've done recently, promote this out in a pretty large way. And I do that for a couple of reasons. One, in my prior life on the government side of the house, this idea of TTPs and threat analytics were really, really, really important to us. And that was kind of the thing that we authored over in the US intelligence community looking for ICS threats globally. And it worked really, really well. And so this is a push from the community through MITRE to document and have a single lexicon of how we talk about the different tactics and techniques of our adversaries. So it allows us to collaborate and do things like information sharing well past just like indicator swapping. And it also allows you to understand your coverage, especially from a threat detection scenario. But in the context of hunting, it also helps you map out those intelligence-driven hypotheses. So if I'm going to go on an intelligence-driven hunt, and I think about the Electrum group. So the Electrum group is a group that we track that was responsible for the 2016 cyber attack on the Ukraine electric transmission site. They're the ones that developed and deployed the crash override malware. So if I think about Electrum and I can understand the TTPs they've done, and I can do it in a way that I can explain to others and share common language, then I can map out kind of their ICS kill chain by leveraging the tactics and techniques that they did. So they compromised an IT historian to pivot into the OT historian. They went in and abused valid accounts to go identify control devices, to then abuse valid accounts to set up internal proxies, ultimately to suppress alarms, do some data destruction, and finally modify the parameters of the RTU through the digital relay to try to damage the equipment, but also deny view and lose control where they had an electric outage at that transmission substation. Well, great. Now I know what that looks like, and I understand the TTPs. That's great. Let me go create a hypothesis-driven hunt off that and say, well, I'm different. Maybe I'm not even an electric environment. Maybe I'm a mining environment. So what would that look like using the same TTPs, but in my environment? Let me go on a hunt to see if I have data storing collection, to what would the valid accounts look like for us? What would the control device identification look like for us, et cetera, all the way down to, okay, well, what would you do here? Maybe I'm modifying the autonomous vehicles and modifying the parameter on them. Or maybe I'm modifying settings as it relates to safety equipment for cyanide baths in terms of stripping, gold out of mined resources, or maybe even HVAC systems for safety purposes. So you can map out that same process, but again, go on a hunt, because I'm not just detecting Electrum here. I'm not detecting crash override. I'm trying to detect further than that, other malware, novel groups, new groups, but that leverage the same type of TTPs. And what you'll find is the adversary may not be doing all of those things, but you might pick up on any one of those tactics and techniques during your hunt of one of those new threats, because there is a lot of TTP overlap between adversaries. That's one of the really good values of taking a threat behavior approach. So that's kind of the way to think about this. And again, I want to talk about what Dragos does and kind of hopefully we can be a good partner for you. But I wanted to walk it in on understanding hunting and doing it in a way that hopefully you can pick it up and run with it with or without us. So when I think of threat hunting and I think about asset owners and operators today in industrial environments, to Tim's point, there is a ton of folks who struggle to find the talent. And it's not that you all aren't awesome, it's that you're busy and there's a ton of crap going on. And it can be really hard to break away to focus on things like hunting when you're really just kind of treading water. Or maybe you've got some open staff positions, but you can't fill them. Or you're just junior in your journey. You haven't been doing visibility for 10 years, but you don't have 10 years to wait. And you really want to pole vault forward. To me, managed threat hunting isn't about, can I triage your alerts and give you an SLA that will triage an alert within 2 hours? That's not hunting. To me, the idea of managed threat hunting is augmenting your team. Now, if you don't have it at all, that's fine too, but it's really about providing almost like a tier 3 service to you that you can go and learn from as well. Our best customers who leverage our managed threat hunting offering today also kind of partner with us by asking our analyst questions, emails back and forth, Slack communications for those that want to do it. It's an interactive type approach, and it ends up being extremely focused on knowledge transfer as well as the deliverables that we've signed up for. And this has taken place for quite some time on the IT side of the house. We have a number of very successful managed threat hunting and managed detection response capabilities that exist over the years. And what we found is everyone from very small organizations to very large organizations usually layer these types of approaches in. Because the reality is, and I hate to make things too commercial, but the reality is the cost isn't that significant, especially when you look at the cost of the FTEs and you look at the value of all the experience you bring to the table to layer in with yours. So I want to walk through some stats and metrics and have a tangible conversation, not just anecdotal, around what we're seeing and get into what we're offering. I'm going to pull from our 2019 year in review reports. Every year we push these reports out just without marketing language. You can read through them. They don't have a bunch of, you should buy the Dragos platform to do X. It's just, no, here's our visibility and our insights and our research from vulnerabilities, what we're seeing in the threats, and frontline lessons learned from things like incident response and assessments. They're freely available. Go check them out. I'm going to drag some of the metrics into this conversation. So one of the first questions you should be asking in ICS security that's actually different than in IT managed detection and response capabilities is that visibility question. Generating a detection is one thing, but understanding the environmental context in ICS is critical. So in other words, detecting lateral movement, okay, that's important, and I would really want to dig into that. But detecting lateral movement between a domain controller and maybe domain controller is a bad example, but detecting lateral movement in between two systems in my DMZ is going to be different, and it's going to have different context, and it's going to drive different response actions than if I detected lateral movement between an HMI and the engineering workstation that interacts with the safety system. So the environmental context of what I'm looking at and that I can see inside ICS protocols and communications is going to be really, really, really core to these kind of offerings. And so it can't just be managed threat hunting. It has to be managed threat hunting and visibility, because you've got to ask that question, what is on your network? And what we've found, and these again come from our year in review reports, is that folks just aren't there yet. And we all know this, but I want to have real tangible data. In 2019, our incident response team, which is, and I don't say this to be braggadocious, but to put it in context, is we have the largest, most experienced ICS incident response team in the world, more so than any government. And 0 of our cases were facilitated with any level of network visibility, aggregated logging, anything of that sort and nature. That's not great. That really sets you back and takes a lot of time then to do incident response, where even just having the capability, even if no one was using it, would have been an extremely helpful thing. 81% from all of our proactive assessments had limited to no visibility in their ICS at all. 100% of people who thought they had an air gap had at least 2 routable connections into their industrial environments. 54% lacked any sort of separate IT and OT user management systems. We don't want to see things like domain controllers and Active Directory bridging the enterprise and the plant. It just ends up being a highway of danger. And then 71% assessed that they had poor security perimeters in general. So when we went into any level of assessment, 71% of them had a pretty porous nature from the enterprise and the ICS. So then you've got to move from what's in my environment and where sort of what's my status, almost protective mechanisms, to am I under attack? And I'll use the word attack very carefully here. We're really talking about adversaries intruding into your environment. I usually talk about intrusions, but is my network under attack? And from what we can tell from just the proactive assessment, because I don't want to get into the incident response cases here, but from proactive assessment, 76% of the clients we worked with could not detect any level of pivoting or escalation of privileges or interaction from the IT to the OT side of the house. In other words, our assessment teams would come in and sort of slowly do things and move it up in nature to try to get detected. And kind of at no matter what level we were at in that pivot from IT to OT, 76% of the proactive engagements weren't finding anything. And think about that for a second, because those are clients that are already mature enough to be asking for these types of assessments. 100% have no visibility and couldn't detect the threats at all inside the ICS environment of the proactive engagements. And I'm not talking about like random malware cases. I'm talking about actual ICS adversary TTPs, especially things that abuse native functionality or communications in the protocols. And then I would just skip to the end and say, in our incident response component, 66% of the incident response cases we interacted with or dealt with involved remote activity from the internet to the ICS. So that was obviously an area that we needed to work on as a community. So how do you respond to it? And when we think about responding, especially in an MTH context, managed threat hunting offerings aren't there to be your incident response team. You still need an incident response team, whether it's Dragos, yourself, or anybody else. You're going to want to have a partner to help you with boots on the ground. Incident response retainers are one of the most common things for all organizations to pick up. They're incredibly useful to have a team on speed dial and to be proactive with them throughout the year, because you don't want to have your first interaction with external help be the day of your incident. What we have found, though, on top of that, is that tabletop exercises have been extremely tangible and important for those approaches. And to tie this back into the managed threat hunting piece, your managed threat hunting team, whoever you choose, should be facilitating and being involved in these things. Now, again, the managed threat hunting team or managed detection response team isn't there to be your incident response team, but they should be supporting the incident. They should be there during it with you, especially remotely leveraging the technology, in this case, the Dragos technology. And they should absolutely be a part of your strategy. But yeah, you do want to have boots on the ground in the time of an incident. So when we start talking about all of our lessons, we all know that You're going to need network analysts as well as hunters and responders. And it's really up to you to kind of figure out how you build out those teams and staff them. I would say in every interaction we have with clients and every survey you read from SANS or elsewhere, we know everyone is under the gun to find talent and is struggling with it. So obviously our answer, our approach, what I'll go through here in the next couple of slides, is to offer the Dragos team to you and to say, let's do this together. So the offering that we're talking about is called Dragos Neighborhood Watch. And so for the past couple of years, we've had really good response from the community. We've really appreciated the interactions with our customers on leveraging and deploying the Dragos platform, which is a technology that we have that provides the asset identification and visibility and sort of mapping of your networks. And sure, it'll also do the anomaly detection work as well. But a big focus, a big differentiator for us has been that it uses our intel in the form of threat analytics. And we were doing TTPs, base detections, long before MITRE ATT&CK ICS stood up. And with those, it also has playbooks and kind of a workbench for you to actually be able to investigate and go step by step through investigating those alerts. So we provided this visibility detection response technology to be deployed onto the networks of these ICS environments around the world. And it's been awesome. And we have real cases where entities have actually gotten ahead of incidents and actually caught sophisticated threats, or even found use cases like GPS clock getting knocked offline that was causing a time shift on the energy management system. They were able to use the Dragos platform to go find where that asset was and make sure from an operations standpoint they were more resilient. That's awesome. But we definitely have a lot of our customers that have been asking us, hey, you've got this great services team that goes out and gets various engagements around the world. Can't we tap into them on a more continuous basis? So the past 2 years, we've been doing that. And for some of our select customers, we were allowing sort of a server deployment in the cloud with the network appliance on-prem. And we were remoting in, or we were using that cloud server to interact with the customer's environments, completely passive, no active anything, but specifically to go hunting for them, helping them, knowledge transfer, kind of continuous training really to some level, and helping them out, making sure they can get full value out of the technology. And it was giving them regular asset identification reports, like key changes in their environments and things they should really focus on, being proactive for them. We have a really, really good intel team. And so when we find some new threat that's not public, can we go ahead and start hunting in a customer's environment before we even make it public? And can we help them during incident response by helping them with incident triage and being there collaborating with them? And we found that it was really, really successful and really well received. Early on, I thought people would be really apprehensive because of the cloud component, and I actually had a customer educate me on it and said, look, if we were actually air-gapped, I would never entertain having a cloud server interacting with anything in an ICS environment. But the reality is we're already hyper-connected. Adding another connection but for the purpose of actually monitoring is an overall risk reduction for us. And we've architected it and from a deployment perspective, where it's usually getting accessed in either the DMZ or the enterprise itself just by forwarding information from the ICS up. So we architect it in a way that we think is pretty good. I think any vendor that sits there and tells you that they have perfect security is a liar. But can we reduce the overall risk by providing you a team that you need and doing it in a mechanism that is overall much more secure? Absolutely. And so from a how it works perspective, the customer deploys the Dragos platform, or we deploy it for them inside their industrial environment. They still get access to it. You can still use it. We want you to be using it. Again, I love when clients build out a more sophisticated team in collaboration with us and are leveraging my folks to transfer knowledge, not just having us be the remote kind of SOC as a service kind of approach. We'll do it for you, especially if you have no team, but you should be leveraging the team to learn from them, because quite frankly, we've got a lot of smart people in the team that have done a lot of really interesting cases. There's not been a single industrial attack since 2010 that has taken place that our folks haven't been involved directly in the front lines on. So how does it work? We deploy the technology in your environment, or you deploy it. We have a cloud server that we deploy, and then our folks monitor it. So our headquarters is in Maryland, and we have another one in Houston, and we're opening up an office in Australia as soon as the COVID situation is resolved. And we got folks that can sort of give you 24/7 work and making sure that you're taken care of. Because even teams with the Security Operations Center, I don't even know that it makes a lot of sense for a lot of you to do 24/7 ops on the ICS side of the house. But having that capability to make sure you're covered at all hours is a good one to have. Obviously, we provide the network visibility piece of the Dragos platform. Again, you can use it yourself, but we're there to really make sure that you're getting full value out of it. So providing you reports and insights into your critical equipment, something drops offline that you think is interesting, or something comes up online, or new protocols or new commands in those protocols, being able to highlight those things for you. Instead of giving you, here's a million anomaly detection alerts, highlighting the ones that we think are actually worth your investigation and action after we've done the preliminary investigation. And all of the things that our customers have grown to love in our technology, like timeline analysis and really being able to dig deep, not just from an inventory perspective, but from really understanding their collection and really understanding their environment and the ICS protocols. From a threat detection perspective, again, it's all still available to you to be able to detect and work off of those tickets that you find and those alerts that you find. The ones we want people to pay attention to are those threat behaviors, detecting things like a new activity group, doing things in your environment. But again, a lot of it is in this context of the managed threat hunting offering of using our people to go do those proactive threat hunts. So it's our folks that are taking the insights and going and sifting through all of the anomalies and all the things that are happening in your environment to really extract out the things that you need to care about. We're also looking at those alerts and doing that alert triage work. But the big takeaway there is we don't want to pick up the phone and call you all the time. We want this done where if we find something significant, we're immediately contacting you, highlighting it for you. We continue to work it. You can work it with us if you want. You don't have to. And we can make sure that you get the information you need and suggested actions. Something as simple as sending you an email or picking up the phone and calling and saying, look, here was Macnalium. And this activity group was the ones that did the Shamoon attack inside Aramco. And their tactics and techniques are being observed in your environment. And here's the risk. And here's what we think you need to do about it. And here's our the information. Here's the context immediately in the Dragos platform for you. Let us highlight this for you. If you want our help in investigating this further, working with you, or if you raise it to incident response and need somebody sort of there with you, here we are. Let us help you. And so really the entire theme there is that our team becomes your team. And I think, I don't want to oversell it, but I do think that's an incredibly important thing when there's not a lot of ICS security experts in the world. And we are all struggling to find the talent, and we're all struggling to have enough insights to really make a difference. And I think doing it together and making sure that it's a true partnership and not just some external team that you don't know the names of the people on, I think that's important. Our customers have gotten really excited about knowing the people in our team and getting to interact with people that they see, whether it's our folks at conferences or social media or whatever, actually in their environments hunting for them. And then sort of two last slides to roll it down. I would just say any key consideration of any managed service you use needs to be an understanding of what you're trying to accomplish. Like a managed threat hunting team is not a SOC as a service. It's not let me triage every alert in your environment and send you a report that we did it. It's, hey, go find threats and help us understand the visibility challenges that we have. Go be proactive. Really do a different level of work in our environment, but especially focused on asset identification and threat hunting. And I would say you need to make sure you have ICS or OT expertise, because that environmental context does matter. And in any significant case, you're going to have to talk to operations. They're the people that we're serving. And so making sure that you can have that conversation with them is important. We've got professional engineers and folks in our team and folks that have lived and worked in those environments their entire careers, so that when it comes time to actually investigating or remediating things, it's not, ICS is not foreign to us. And then the third thing that I'll say is no matter how good the talent you have is, and I've seen in my classes the level of talent that exists in the community, it's awe-inspiring. No matter that level though, it really is about the at-bats. In other words, how often do you get to engage with these threats? How often are you getting called in on incident response cases and hunting and similar? And for our team, it's significant. So we're constantly getting way more at-bats than any single team in the world could be doing at any asset owner or operator. And we're able to take all of that expertise and insight from around the global coverage and be able to add that into your environment, and all of the work we're doing on the intel side or any case we find in anybody else's environment, making sure that's immediately accessible to everybody for a true global intelligence sharing capability. And then if you're just interested in what that can look like, We did a case study with Trinity River Authority. So Doug Short, the CIO and CSO of Trinity River Authority, and then the wonderful folks at TRA were very kind to be public in a case study. I think that's a very rare thing, especially in our community. But Doug has always been an amazing advocate of sharing lessons learned and trying to encourage others to get and do ICS security. And so Trinity River Authority did a full case study with us, fully overt, with kind of the way that they have approached it. They're a fantastic Texas water utility, and we've been working with them for a couple of years now, and be able to really highlight and document exactly what this looks like and kind of what value they're receiving. That case study is up on our website for anybody who wants to go take a look at it and kind of dig a little bit deeper. So with that, I'll go ahead and pause there for a second. Tim, did you have anything? And then I can get into questions and answers. Tim, you better not have stepped away in a critical moment. I'm going to harass you at the next conference. It's okay. You're probably on mute. I love you anyways, Tim.
I was double muted. And no, I don't.
The one
I'm
job
more
you
interested
have,
to see.
there it goes out the window. No.
I'm anxious to see what the questions are.
Okay, all right. Yeah, let's get to the questions. So the first question is, there was a slide that I showed that was the first malware to target human life. What was that? That would be the Trisis malware, the case in Saudi Arabia, where the adversary intentionally targeted the safety system for the purpose of removing the safety logic. There is no other reason to target a safety system. There are easier ways to take down the plant. So it was our assessment that they were specifically trying to kill people at that site, and it was the assessment of the incident responders as well. Since most current threats are state-sponsored, would it help companies to work or share with the U.S. government related to indicators and tactics, how to get around classification issues with dealing government agencies? Great question. I do think there's a better together story. I do think U.S. government, the Swiss government, Norwegian government, the Australian government, just so many governments around the world have been pretty proactive on this. I think the sensitivity and the classification issue is usually related to attribution and sometimes related to the technical indicators. And the reality is you don't need either of those. Technical indicators can help, but the reality is they're usually victim specific anyways. And the attribution is completely not required from an incident response and detection scenario perspective. So your second part of your question is spot on around it being related to tactics. And so what we're seeing U.S. government do specifically, especially like the DHS's CSA, is they're starting to talk about things in the MITRE ICS attack language. They've already been doing it around MITRE attack on the enterprise. They're starting to do it on MITRE attack ICS, and there's actually no issue with sharing those. We've actually facilitated that for a lot of our clients when we do incident response cases. I usually ask, can we share these insights with the government? Sometimes the answer is no, sometimes the answer is yes. When the answer is yes, the way that we do it is in the form of TTPs. We'll tell people, hey, there was an incident at a utility. You don't need to know which one. You don't need to know who they are, but here are the things that they observed and lessons learned. Please make that available to the community. And we find that ends up being an extremely effective way. These are really great stats, but for frame of reference, roughly how many incident response cases are we talking about? I'm particularly interested in 100% of the air gap networks had been circumvented. So two good questions, going to break them out. So we never get into like how many cases we're working. I think it's a very fair question. You're usually talking about tens of incident response cases. These aren't hundreds of incident response cases. There's a lot more going on in the community than people realize, but at the same time, not everything gets called an incident. So I want to be very specific and careful with my words. Just because there's adversary activity in an environment and somebody wants to remediate it does not necessarily make it an incident. It could just be an event. We do a lot of event work, especially from when you consider regulation and the fact that you have to report incidents, and it gets kind of crazy about terminology. The 100% air gap thing isn't about circumventing it. That's not related to the incident response. That's related to just proactive assessments that 100% of the cases we went into, so 100% of the assessments we went into, the folks that thought they had an air gap had multiple routing points. And and so you ask sort of like, how is that happening? Essentially, it's either in firewalls that weren't configured correctly, or folks that had diodes in and out to the IT department, but then they had VPNs and interactions with the vendors and the maintenance folks. And usually you'll find that you have some level of remote connectivity with integrators, maintenance, or the ICS OEM, even if you can't access the enterprise directly. A question from Australia about opening up Dragos in Australia, when and where, or sorry, it just says where. When would just be after all this craziness goes on. We have employees right now in Perth and Melbourne. The headquarters we're going to be opening up will be in Melbourne. Are the Dragos neighborhood watch analysts dedicated to specific customer accounts, or are they hunting across all your customers? Great question. We are hunting across all the customers. I don't want one person on one customer. I want all of the different people to be interacting across and sharing the lessons learned. So the way that it works is we have dedicated folks that are just doing neighborhood watch, but we also have all of our services folks that are out doing incident response cases and threat hunting engagements and pen testing and similar, take turns through neighborhood watch internally as well. So in other words, as people come off engagements, they can just jump onto monitoring customer environments. That way that we're constantly like transferring knowledge from the field. And then the people that are on neighborhood watch full-time, we cycle them in and out as well. That way there's this always cross collaboration. People go out to the field, bring their lessons in, et cetera, but it's not like you just have access to one analyst. You do have access to them as named people though. It's not like some random distro and you don't know who these folks are. We want you to interact with them, but we want to put as much of our talent in front of you as possible. And then the last question, and then we gotta go ahead and bounce off here. Actually, two questions. One is around costs, and one is around incorporating industry compliance, and actually another one's about Europe. So I'll go real quick. Europe, we have people already, like we have folks in Germany as an example, but we don't have a dedicated office there yet. We'll have to look at it post-COVID. We do have customers in Europe currently. From a compliance perspective, it's really hard in electric, as an example. I don't know any way around doing this in NERC-CIP environment, so I just think that unfortunately, under the current status of the regulations, this would not be applicable to any NERC-CIP environments. However, we do work with customers on their business continuity and compliance aspects, and they can also use our service engagements for us to help define those things for them, especially around bridging cyber and safety, and then being able to execute against that. And then from the cost question, it is an uplift on the Dragos platform. So we sell the Dragos platform based on the number of network appliances you need, and then the uplift for the services. The way to think about it is roughly 25 to 30% of your platform cost would be a services cost. And it's not a bucket of hours. If you want a bucket of hours, that's just incident response retainers with us. If you want the ongoing kind of 24/7 neighborhood watch thing, that's that 20 to 30% uplift on the Dragos platform. Cool. Whew. A lot of questions. Good questions. Thank you all for your interaction. And Carol, back to you.
All right, thank you so much, Rob and Tim, for your great presentation, and to Dragos for sponsoring this webcast, which helps bring this content to the SANS community. To our audience, we greatly appreciate you listening in. For a schedule of all upcoming and archived SANS webcasts, including this one, please visit sans.org/webcasts. Until next time, take care, and we hope to have you back again for the next SANS webcast.